This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Bear Boat Alaska. Up your DIY hunting game with one of their 37-foot adventure yachts. You and 5 of your friends can hunt, fish, set crab pots, shrimp pots, and take DIY to the next level. Bear Boat Alaska is locally owned by a Ketchikan resident who lives here year-round. Call Larry at 907-617-4542 or go to bearboatalaska.com. That's B-A-R-E boatalaska.com and tell Larry you heard about it on this podcast. Welcome back to the podcast. I have my wife Abby here.
Hello.
And we are going to answer some questions that we got from someone who visited the website. We have Tyler, who went to themediocrealaskan.com and went to the bottom there and scrolled down and asked a couple of questions that we figured there would just be a great idea for us to just answer them on a podcast, a separate special podcast.
Yep.
Answer the question because we're sure that people down south have the same questions. So thank you to Tyler for asking the questions, filling out that form, and we're going to answer those questions. So the first one here, the main thing here, the overarching theme was kind of sustainability and what Alaska looks like, and I'm not putting words in his mouth, but I think that there's a lot of people who have become tired of kind of how maybe even a little bit leading up to the pandemic and through the pandemic just wanted space, was hoping and looking for a space that was maybe free of a lot of the stuff that was going on down south. And I think the perception is that Alaska might be that best place to get.
Yeah,
so
and you and I have both lived down south, and we chose to live here, so we get both perspectives too.
Yeah. Abby grew up back east. I lived in California for a couple of years after college. All right, so here we go. The first question, are the local fisheries as sustainable as advertised? Someone who grew up on Prince of Wales, I'm used to just massive amounts of fish. Grew up fishing a lot. It was great. And even moving back to Ketchikan Klawock in 2013, over to Ketchikan here in 2014. There was this king salmon derby that's now been switched to a silver salmon derby, and the king salmon openings have changed. Up north part of town, it's June 15th, and we just got the regulations out for the south part. Mountain Point doesn't open until the 6th of June, but only Herring Cove, where that terminal run is, opens on June 1st. So we're definitely seeing some declines in populations or decisions being made to help preserve stuff. So that might make it sound like things are bad or dwindling, and they are, but there's also a level of perspective. The days of being able to catch massive fish very, very quickly are probably gone, but that doesn't mean they're not still around. You can definitely come to Ketchikan, Southeast Alaska, and you can catch some big fish, and you can catch them relatively quickly. But I think our perception is that the good old days, even the people who are fishing in the 90s, they're looking back at the good old days being the 70s and 80s. So perspective has a big part of this question, or has a big part in the answer to this question. The pink runs have been pretty solid. Chum, solid. Silvers, solid. Kings, which is the most marketable advertised fish, they're not as many as there were. The fishing dates have changed. They're not as big, and there's a lot of things that go into that. You're talking climate change, you're talking the impact of trawlers, you're talking the impact of charter fishermen, of rental fleets, of commercial fishermen. So there's a lot of things that are going into that. Bait, So a lot of things that need to be talked about and are being talked about, which is really nice. There's a lot of finger pointing, but there's also a lot of, hey, let's consider every single thing about this problem and see what we can do. And I think the Department of Fish and Game and the biologists here in Alaska do a pretty good job, especially comparatively, to manage the fisheries, to look at what happened down south and say, hey, given that, let's try to make these decisions and try to preserve this. So Is it as sustainable as advertised? There are precautions that need to be made. We're making some changes. There's a lot of fish around. It's not what it was, but it's still an unbelievable place to come up, to fish, to really enjoy.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, the salmon fishing is better in Alaska than it is anywhere else, for sure, 100%. And there's a lot of really accessible places that you can go and catch salmon. And then I would also add to that, coming from down south, before I ever visited Alaska, I was mostly a college student, so limited budget, but I ate farmed salmon, I ate pink salmon, and I just thought, I'm eating salmon, and that's healthy, it's great. And now, of course, living in Ketchikan, been up here with Jeff fishing for several years now. There's rivers in town you can go and catch 6 pink salmon in a river in a couple hours if you want to. If you want to eat pink salmon, which I'm sure tastes way better fresh out of the river here than it does once it's been packaged and moved around down south. So I think that's a really sustainable source of fish. And yeah, we don't eat pink salmon anymore because now I know what silver and king and sockeye salmon taste like, and I do know the difference, but that's not to say that pink salmon isn't good and that you can't have a lot of fun catching them. I love going down and catching them on the fly rod, which Jeff is kind of smirking because he's like, oh, that's cute.
No, no, not at all. You misinterpreted that.
Okay.
I think it's a lot of fun to catch them on the
and then,
fly rod.
I think that's a really sustainable protein source too. So kind of depends on your expectations and what your goals are, I guess.
Yeah, I think people would look at that as evidence of not being as sustainable if you have to go down to the lowest common or the least of it's the most available but the least desirable fish would be evidence that it's not as sustainable, not as healthy as people want. But it all just it's a matter of perspective. So yeah, there's a lot of fish around. It's still pretty good. Your rockfish, like a lot of the easily accessible spots, are not what they were. You can't just go 2 minutes outside of the dock and catch some really big halibut, but in some places you can. So it's kind of a tough question, but yeah, there's definitely a lot of fish up here. It's definitely an awesome place to fish. There are big fish around, so. If someone were to want to move up here because of that, there's definitely going to be a population of fish for the foreseeable future. Mm-hmm. Next question. Do you think, and I'll give this to Abby, do you think the Ketchikan community at large is becoming more aware of the environmental, sustainable issues that plague society, or are they generally not interested in hearing about climate change? So I have kind of a local perspective from someone who's lived here for a long time, but I think your perspective is really important because you've just kind of seen it. So what have you seen?
Yeah, I think that because Ketchikan is our economy and is largely dependent on tourism, but people come here because they want to see the beautiful landscapes and the wildlife. And the first time I saw, a whalefin breach or seeing bears like catching salmon at the river, it's crazy that if you live here you can just see that on your drive home. And I think people are that obviously can be overlooked when you live here, but I think because we do live so close with such beautiful vistas and landscapes, but also with wildlife, that a lot of people are pretty aware of environmental issues. And that's kind of at a general population level. And then when you look at different entrepreneurs and businesses in the community, I think a lot of people are really interested in how we can make our community more sustainable. We have, there's a business that they're doing hydroponic farming. because food security is kind of a problem for us here. We have these great protein sources, but getting fresh greens is difficult because everything comes in on the barge or on a plane. And so there is definitely, I think, a push for how can we get more local food sources. We have, kelp farming going on over on Prince of Wales, oyster farming. I think that, and I think too, it is economically feasible because it takes out the sometimes astronomical shipping costs that we have to get things here. And so those costs make localized food sources a lot more competitive economically, and then also have the added benefit of cutting down on our carbon emissions here. And I think savvy entrepreneurs are pretty aware of that. And so I would say I've been really impressed with Ketchikan as a community generally.
Yeah, it's cool to see people looking at solutions to problems and discussing nuance rather than just because they don't live in it taking some sort of political side and virtue signaling or whatever. It's cool to see people supporting sustainable businesses that are addressing this problem but also providing a really good product and value to people. Like we like to
practical.
Like to get those greens because it's healthy, it's good, it stays in the fridge a lot longer than stuff you get at the store. It's just it's good. You don't buy that just so you can say, oh, look at me, I'm supporting local, or look at me, I'm reducing my carbon footprint. That's kind of a byproduct of buying a good thing that's provided to you that is a quality food source.
Yeah, and it's mind-blowing how much better it is.
Yeah, it is quite good. So it's nice that the Ketchikan has those opportunities. So I think there are some people who are climate change is a hoax, and some other people who are, super climate change, AOC, Green New Deal. But I think by and large, there's a good conversation because we all have the vested interest in protecting what we have around us rather than protecting or trying to protect or looking like we were trying to protect something that's thousands of miles away. So next thing here. Has the housing market there been absolutely insane like it's been almost everywhere in the lower 48? Ketchikan is weird. Southeast Alaska is weird in that the topography does not allow for large plots of buildable land. So you're building up on slopes often as you come up out of the ocean. So one of the reasons why land is so expensive and thus houses are so expensive here is because you just don't have a ton of available land or homes. So, stuff's pretty expensive. The lot that we got, there are some things that people probably found that were wrong with it as far as size of the building pad compared to the actual size of the acreage or the size of the lot. Access to the lot was through an easement. So these are just things that, people thought, which is perfect because it was something that we could afford. And so we're not looking at building a big house. We're building a smaller house that barely meets the covenants. But so yeah, I think that the housing is expensive here, but it's less volatile in that you're not going to have the oversaturation where you have 100, 150 extra homes that need to be sold. So it's going to be expensive. It is expensive. It's not nearly as bad as Juneau, but yeah, it's pretty spendy.
After years of fine print contracts and getting ripped off by big wireless providers, if we've learned anything, it's that there's always a catch. So when I first heard that Mint Mobile offers premium wireless starting at just $15 a month, I thought, what's the catch? But after talking to them and using their service, it all made sense. There isn't one. Mint Mobile's secret sauce is that they're the first company to sell wireless service online only. They cut out the cost of retail stores and pass those sweet savings directly to you. For anyone who hates their phone bill, Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for just $15 a month. I was hesitant about having to get a new phone and a new phone number, but with Mint, You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone and your same phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Mint Mobile gives you the best rate whether you're buying for one or for a family, and at Mint, families start at 2 lines. All plans come with unlimited talk and text plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Switch to Mint Mobile and get premium wireless service starting at just $15 a month. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and to get the plans shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/waypoint. That is mintmobile.com/waypoint. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/waypoint.
Yeah, I think housing up here is way more expensive than probably most people would guess because, like you said, there is actually a shortage of developable land. I mean, the mountains rise up from the ocean pretty quickly. And then on top of that, like, we're building a house right now, and we had to budget in. A pretty big chunk of our budget is shipping because everything is coming here on a barge up from Seattle. And so that's just adding a premium to all of our products here, including houses. And so houses were expensive pre-pandemic, and as tourism increases and as more people want to move to rural areas, I think we've also seen an increase in housing prices here in Ketchikan as well.
Yeah. And as a brief little go back to the previous question about sustainability, that's another thing too. You know, everything we get up here that we can't get here comes up on the barge. And so if you are talking about, okay, how can I be carbon neutral or reduce my carbon footprint? There's a lot of stuff that comes up on the barge. So you can, buy stuff at the hydroponic farm. You can, eat kelp and you can hunt deer and you can catch fish, but there's going to be a level of stuff that ends up coming up on the barge. Mm-hmm. And then ultimately too, we draw our electricity from very small creeks and one decent sized river. So we are very prone to having not a lot of electrical output being created or power being created because of these creeks when things get dry. So when we are low on power, then we have to go on diesel. So it's anyway, yeah. So that is a little side note there. Next question there. We'll have you start with this one, Abby. How does the community deal with seasonal depression? I grew up here, so it was a little different. So how was your first winter here?
Yeah, I think everyone deals with it a little bit differently, and I think for me, I was trying to write my dissertation this first winter, and it was definitely difficult. I mean, I think probably the whole work from home trend, I think it would be pretty difficult here because it's hard when I was sitting inside at the computer trying to write and do analyses or whatever all day, and it's dark and it's rainy for sure. And if you don't get out and do something, like, you will be depressed. I definitely battled that a little bit. But on the flip side of that, I do think that, and we were living, so Ketchikan basically, because of the problems you talked about where the ocean or the mountains kind of rise up out of the ocean, basically it's a highway, but I mean, the speed limit is like 45 most of the way. That runs north to south, and there might be a couple blocks off the highway that have houses and stuff, but it's a long, narrow city, and so we were living about 25 minutes north of the downtown area. And so there are a lot of events in town. There's a rec center. There's different community centers where people will hold events like there's like art walks, and the rec center is always having yoga classes and fun little events.
Yeah. Home basketball games are very strongly attended.
Yeah, basketball games are fun. And so I think there's definitely a recognition in the community that we need to organize events and have things to do to get people out at that time of year. But I think we maybe could have done a better job of getting out and doing things, because there's also definitely, at least for me, I kind of tend to be more of a homebody, or I don't know. But there's some inertia to just like stay home when gets dark at 3:30. You're like, well, you've eaten dinner. It's 5 o'clock. I don't know if I want to drive 25 minutes into town, so.
Yeah.
Um,
We did happen to live in a place where there were some friends that were pretty close, and there was a marina fairly close, and so a couple times we walked down there, and they had a little fire in a fire ring, or we'd go down to Larry's place, and he'd be making salmon wontons or something like that. He calls it the cooking season, so it gets dark and so you do that stuff. But yeah, like you said, it's difficult to get motivated to redo that. You come home and it's dark, and so your brain is thinking, okay, let's start shutting it down, but there's a lot of hours left, and it's hard to get up in the morning. You're driving to school or work in the dark and driving home in the dark, and it's not nearly as bad here as it is up north. But the problem with here is that when the sun does come up, it rains so often here that rather than get cold blue sky, you get gray, rainy sky. And I think that wears on a lot of people more than maybe if you were up in the Fairbanks area where it's really, really cold, maybe 10, 15 below, but at least you get to see the blue sky. And Matsu Valley, which is about, I don't know, maybe a little bit, pretty close to halfway in between Matsu Valley and the Kenai Peninsula, very much colder than here. But again, that blue sky thing can make a world of difference for people, and recreational activities too, because you got snow rather than down here where you're getting rain. You're getting that 37, 41, and rainy. It's pretty tough.
Yeah. I was going to add to that, too. Yeah, I, obviously coming from Wyoming in the winter, I really, and I'm a runner, so I like to run, and it can be difficult here in the winter the trails are kind of snowed in, so you can't really run on them, and then I ended up just running up and down the highway, which, quickly becomes not very fun when it's sideways rain and mostly dark. So it was hard, and it was hard for me to find like outdoor activities that I really enjoyed. And I do think if there was like one thing I could change about Ketchikan, it would be if we got more snow actually, and we could go ski, or if we don't, we have a trail system for sure, but it's nothing like what they have up north, and definitely jealous of their ability to just get out and ski or fat bike or do those sorts of things.
Yeah. Last question here. How prevalent are crime and alcoholism in your community? Growing up on Prince of Wales, you saw alcoholism, and Alaska is notorious for alcoholism, suicide, especially among the native communities in the rural areas. Now we're getting more into that substance abuse and some of the harder stuff, which is really sad, but like that is everywhere. And that's led on more by the feeling of isolation, the feeling of loneliness during the winters. And also because you're not on the road system, a lot of these communities there's no way out. And that can be pretty sad and unfortunate. So you definitely have to deal with that, and that's sad and unfortunate. But again, it's so many of these companies have just such a robust and tenacious attitude. And there are opportunities for people to do things. The first year that I moved back here and lived in Klawock is such a small community of 650, 700 people that during the winter, like there's nothing to do. There's you don't have a community center type thing. So that was really tough. Ketchikan is much better, and there's a lot of stuff that's going on there. But that's definitely something to think about, worry about. But it ultimately comes down to nowhere is perfect. I think we want to look for some sort of brochure that this is the one place that's escaped all of the nonsense that was even happening before the pandemic and then after. And it's easy for us to point out the bad things about Ketchikan, but ultimately, we're still here because the benefits outweigh, the alternatives. I look at what's worse, that I have to deal with rain and gray or traffic. The fact when I was living in California, it was an hour and a half to get anywhere that was even somewhat I wouldn't even say isolated, that there was a chance that you might be able to fish one small corner of a river by yourself. And that was for stock trout. And growing up here obviously makes it different too, because I, grew up and I got to experience that. But, I think the attitude is the biggest thing. If you move to a Ketchikan or to a Kenai or to a Wasilla or whatever, the attitude's going to be the biggest thing. And you move to Wasilla because there's more land available, it's cheaper, and you can drive everywhere. But it's going to be colder. It can be more daylight. Maybe you can, grow some better crops. It's warmer during the summers. But ultimately, what's going to make you happy or not is going to be your attitude. And the same thing here with Ketchikan. It's going to be rainy. You're going to buy your extra tough boots. You're going to buy a bunch of rain gear and going to be part of the community. And if you are, it's going to be a lot better. If you come up here and just expect it to be better, then it's probably going to disappoint you.
Yeah, and I would add to that too. I think, the substance abuse is a problem across the United States, and I don't want to discredit that. I think there's a lot of people that are struggling with that right now, and that's definitely prevalent in Ketchikan, although, the people that we interact with and the way that we live, it's really easy to forget that. But I think, too, when you look at Ketchikan, I think a big part of the reason why, we talked about what if we move somewhere else, and I think a big part of the reason why we chose to stay in Ketchikan is because, and correct me if I'm putting words in your mouth, but at the high school here, sure, you get kids that are tough anywhere, but you also have a lot of just really great students, and that's because, there's a great community that supports them. They have great families, and a lot of these kids are really thoughtful, really high-achieving kids, and I think that speaks to the character of the community as well.
Well said. I agree, 100%.
And so, yeah.
Well, that's all the questions. So definitely thank you to Tyler for finding that. I can't guarantee that anybody who ends up sending us comments on the mediocrealaskan.com will get their own episode, but I thought those were really good questions, and took the opportunity with Abby here to address those. So thanks for listening. Check out the mediocrealaskan.com. You can check out the Mediocre Alaskan on Instagram and check out kind of what we're doing regarding the outdoor program and the building of the home. We'll be over on Prince of Wales Island this summer. Abby's got a job over there, and I'll be hanging out, fishing, having fun. Mm-hmm. So thanks again for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.